Welcome everyone to the fourth session of our Learning Collaborative. You all know the deal. I'm going to wait just a moment to make sure everyone has a chance to get connected to audio, as well as let any latecomers get connected in general. And while we do that, we'll bring up our PowerPoint. Hope everyone's doing well on this Wednesday afternoon. All right, I'm not seeing any more people look like they need to connect to audio, so we'll get started, especially since, again, as you know, these first few minutes are a little bit of a refresher. So like I said, welcome to the fourth session of our recruitment boot camp for this year. Every time I put spring 2023, I'm like, and soon it will actually be spring. I know everyone's from all over and different places come to spring earlier than others, but I'm in Colorado and it snowed like 2 days ago. So anyway, spring 2023, that's where we live. And today's session will be focusing on interviews and the on-site visit piece of so, you know, those phone interviews, but then also in-person or on-site visits. Interviews. As you know, this is our Star Center team. This is your Learning Collaborative team specifically. I will say Alex is out today traveling, so our colleague Michelle is on the line. You can, of course, reach out to any of us if you have any questions or concerns or are interested in any of the programs we do. Again, I won't go through this. As you all know, we are part of the Association of Clinicians for the Underserved, or ACU, and this program is offered through our STAR Center, which is an NTAP, a National Training and Technical Assistance partner, and we focus on health center workforce recruitment and retention. And again, fourth session, you all know this, but we've got some housekeeping. The session is being recorded, and the recording will be posted on the discussion board. So if you want to review anything, go check there. We encourage you to be present. I know it says if possible, be on camera. The most important thing is that you're on camera, if possible, during those breakout sessions, which we will do another of later today. So no pressure during sort of the didactic section, but I know that it's great when you're in a breakout session to be able to see who you're talking to. As always, feel free to use the chat to put any questions, comments, or thoughts, or just unmute yourself. Feel free to interrupt me if things are coming up as we're going through things. And of course, you can send a message to Mariah here through the chat function, or you can email her if you're having any technical difficulties. And as always, please do fill out the evaluation after the session. It really does help us with our BIPIC deliverables and also just to continue enhancing and improving our offerings. So our icebreaker today is a little quiz. Michelle has put the link directly in the chat, or you can hold up your phone to get that QR code to go. We've got a question for this quiz. Our first question is, what % of the global workforce will millennials and Gen Z make up by 2025? So I'll give you all another moment or two to get connected to that Mentimeter. And now I will share a different screen. Okay, so got 9 players ready. And what % of your global workforce will be millennials and Gen Z? You've got 15 seconds. Got 7 answers in. Everyone has voted. Okay. All right, let's see. Oh God, wait. Okay, we got 2 correct answers. Most folks on that 56%, but yeah, the answer is that it will be 75%. I'll go through the answers a little bit more once we go through. All right, your next question, if everybody's ready. Don't worry about the points. What % of companies use social media platforms to look up candidates? Okay. Another one where we've got a lot of close but no cigars. And then, yeah, the correct answer is 92%. All right. And then wait for that 10th player. Great. Oh, I have to. Okay. What percent of candidates get rejected due to an overall confidence level, voice quality, or lack of smile? Okay. And yeah, it's 39%. But yeah, I could definitely see it being higher. This is kind of one of those questions where you're like, what do you mean exactly? Which is lack of confidence making you anyway. Interesting to go there. All right. Wow. The things are happening. Oh my God. The points are changing. Wow, great job. Angelica. Fantastic. With a tie. Oh, it was a tie with sorry, I can't remember. Or I can't
I think
now.
it was hula hoop.
Okay, great. Amazing. Fantastic. Way to go. Thanks for participating in my icebreaker that is a quiz. What fun. All right, so go back to sharing this bad boy. All right, so yeah, as you learned, the answer was 75% for this first question, that Gen Z and millennials will make up 75% of the workforce by 2025. And so this is just good to know as we're thinking about who our potential candidates are. The workplace of the future is here, according to those statistics. Currently, millennials they already encompass half of the American workforce, while the number of Gen Z and millennials total together is expected to increase by 25% in the next couple of years. So yeah, I think it's just really important that we think about. So often as a millennial, I often feel like I'm like thought of as like new to the workforce, but millennials have been in the workforce for 15 to 20 years, depending on what range of millennials they are. And yeah, our Gen Zs are coming in hot, and they'll be a big part of who we're interviewing and interacting with. And then it's 92% of organizations use social media platforms to look up their candidates. So since we live in the 21st century, of course, it's normal for all corporations to have social media platforms. So it's very easy for every recruiter to look folks up online. And according to job interview statistics, in 2018, over 70% of recruiters screened candidates by checking their social media profiles, while 43% of HR personnel check their employees' profiles on a regular basis. So not only are folks looking once they have a candidate, they're looking before they necessarily have a candidate to screen folks, and then they're looking even once they have hired folks. And then there was that 39%. And this, I think, goes into thinking about implicit bias. So how are we viewing folks, and depending on how they're presenting, and that could be depending on their, whether they have anxiety or their cultural background. So it's always just important to make sure that we're being really thoughtful and trying not to let our implicit biases impact who we're hiring and how and why. All right. So with all that in mind, we'll be sending you into those breakout groups that I mentioned to reflect on that coursework on advertising and social media. Of course, though, before we do that, were there any questions about the coursework? Anything that came up for anyone that you want to check in about before we move into those breakout groups? Not seeing anything in the chat. If anything comes up, of course, feel free to bring it up in afterwards. Like after you've been in your groups, and otherwise we'll send you into those breakout groups. Michelle just put them in the questions in the chat, but your questions are: how are you already successfully using social media and advertising in your recruitment efforts, and what are some of your challenges in this area? So enjoy that time with your peers, and we'll see you in about 15 minutes. All right, welcome back, everyone. We heard some feedback from some of our participants that these questions, there are only two of them, which is fair, and that this conversation wasn't sparking as much for folks, and that they'd like to circle back to some of what we talked about last time around job announcements and creating compelling job announcements and job posts. Also, I'm seeing that there was one more room that wasn't closed that I didn't realize. So I'm so sorry. Let me just repeat that really quickly. So thank you, everyone. I realized that was not the 15 minutes I had promised, but we just got some feedback that folks would rather have a little bit of a bigger group discussion and circle back on some of what we talked about last session about making compelling job postings. And we actually have, it's obviously we miss Alex very much, but it's great that Michelle is here with us today. This is one of her areas of expertise on our team. So first of all, I'd like to just open the floor to are there any specific questions that were coming up around sprucing up your job announcements, making them really stand out and appealing? And yeah, I'll open up the floor to that, and feel free to unmute or put them in the chat.
I guess one of the advice I had been given is to make the job postings pretty short, under 300, under 300 words or less. And then be kind of inviting. Again, I know that's kind of contrary to a lot of us in healthcare, but really kind of highlighting the benefits of the job, the organization, and what the minimum requirements are. And then using the job title that is pretty common for the job that you have out there at least 3 or 4 times, so it gets picked up through Google searches.
And Helen, I'm happy to jump in. And Marcy, was that the advice you were given from the previous session? I just want to make sure that I'm addressing.
It was not. You guys didn't
Okay.
really talk a whole lot about that. So
okay, so one of the things that I would say now for the wording length itself, I think that really is based on what you feel is appropriate for your health center, because to be honest, I feel like 300 words, it's actually too short to be able to get across the attention of the individuals that you're looking for. So what we say is not necessarily, it's important to keep it concise. That is definitely part of it. However, there's certain key pieces that we really highlight, especially when you're trying to get mission-driven providers and staff. So ensuring that you're putting in at least some aspect of your mission into your job announcements, and that you are mentioning the population you work with. The reason for this is a lot of people, especially those who are coming to go work at health centers, especially if they're clinicians, and I'm talking across the board with all different types of specialties. Sometimes they've had either specialized training with certain populations or specifically looking for jobs to work with those populations. So highlighting that is really important. Detailing what the job would actually require. I think a lot of times we use more adjectives or subjective language, such as saying, a high-paced environment, those type of things. We say, using those words are really not effective to capture people's attention. They really want to know, what are they doing on a regular basis? So that they actually know what they're applying for. And I would also ensure to add on a salary range. A lot of people who are looking for jobs will not even continue to read a job posting if there is no salary range on there. And I'm trying to think through the different pieces of information. And actually what I've seen with health centers, the ones who have been the most effective in their job announcements are actually not the ones that are shorter, but some of the ones that detail more information. So there was one health center that in the middle of their job announcement, they put a link that took them back to a web page on their website where they just had little short videos of what it was like to work in the health center, what it is like to live in that community, just give people more information. So really you are marketing not just the position, but you're trying to break through the noise and market your health center. What does it really mean to work there. Highlighting benefits, especially if you have any unique benefits, is incredibly important. Knowing the fact that health centers usually are not able to compete with the same amount of compensation as like hospital systems or private doctors' offices. So in this case, I would actually say having a fuller job announcement, but being very intentional on what you're picking and putting in there is very important. I do agree on Google picking up the names of the positions. However, and if I misunderstood, please let me know. Ensure that the job title that you're putting in your job announcement is the exact job title that that person will be getting if they were to get that position, because that could also create some discrepancies around experience or salaries, things like that. And I'm trying to think just of some other pieces. Is there anything else specifically that you were looking for as you're drafting your job announcements? But my overall feedback is, as health centers, it really is like a way to fully market yourself and hit on different pieces of who you are, who your population is, what is the actual role of the job, because people want to know, what am I coming in to do on a day-to-day basis? And especially as we see millennials and Gen Z in the workforce, they're like, this is what I'm hired for, so this is what I'm going to do. So it's very important to put that in the job announcements, the salary requirements, and anything that's sort of interesting, like, like that health center that put a link with videos that told people. Another one in their job announcement, they had posted that this is a great place to go hiking. So you basically, the goal is to really break through that noise and get the attention, not just of people who fit that role, but also have that mission-driven mindset behind it. And again, one of the things we really focusing on is ensuring salary ranges are posted and being aware that posting the salary range that you would feel comfortable paying at the highest end, while if that is not the case, you can tell people exactly why. And it would also save you time in the long run, because you don't want to take someone through the whole interviewing process, as Helen will talk about today, and then realize like there's a discrepancy, we feel different about the salary or things like that, because you spend a lot of time and energy and money in that process.
Thank you so much, Michelle. I would just second a lot of that really quickly. The 300 words, yeah, it feels really short. I think there's probably a like best of both worlds thing of like, you could have almost like a highlights at the top that's like title, benefits, salary, like minimum requirements, and then also include that more like, here's our mission, here's our community, here's the benefits of living and working here, etc. But so I can kind of see something like that, but I do think you absolutely need more than 300 words to, like Michelle is saying, like sell yourself. And then Angelica, it seemed like you had a question.
Yeah, I was going to ask Michelle her thoughts on the search words and the keywords and having those in the job post. What experience she has, is that makes a big difference, or how broad that should be.
It is really important. And especially, for example, if you're posting on like LinkedIn, it's picking up on those keywords, the hashtags that you're putting as part of it. It's just going to reach a larger audience for you. So it is an important thing to take into consideration 100%. What I will say though, with Google, their algorithm, they're really secretive about their algorithm and like what really they highlight and they don't. And there's a lot of research on how effective the searching really is for what the results that it gives you. So what I would say is, depending on the website that you're posting, so if it's LinkedIn, Indeed, there's one that I promote a lot called Idealist. It's focused on mission-driven like specifically for nonprofit type of jobs, and I can put their website in the chat in a moment. But using key search words that will get you noticed within those websites, I think it's a very important thing, because there's just so many people competing right now that you want to try to break through that. And that's something too, as you're posting on the sites, you can, it depends on the site, but you can look at what are some of the structures that they're using in their search engines, things like that. But LinkedIn especially is really great when you put a bunch of like hashtags and everything, because it's going to pull through individuals who are looking at those keywords.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that. That's a lot of great information. And then just since I have you here, I really want to take advantage. Do you have somewhere that I can reference to see where I should pull these search words from and these keywords from, just to really make sure I'm getting that whole audience?
Right. That is actually a really good question. And we don't have that. However, let me see what I can find out about that. And the reason that I say I don't think that there's one resource necessarily, because it is going to be different website to website. What I would say, so for example, anytime I post anything on LinkedIn, I always do like healthcare, jobs, opportunities, like literally anywhere that could potentially be within the realm of the type of individuals you're looking to reach. But let me see if I can find anything. And if I do, I'll send it to Helen so we could share it with everybody here. Also, on a side note, so we do TA. So if anybody has really specific questions on your health center and some of the things you may be thinking about, you can contact me directly and we're happy to offer that. I don't know if it was mentioned in the previous one with Alex. We also will review job announcements for those of us, like all of you, that are in our learning collaborative cohorts. We do have some limitations that usually we're just able to review about one or two. But what we do is basically we go through the whole thing and give you that generalized feedback of like, hey, in each job postings, consider putting this or consider having this other information. So I'm happy to definitely provide that. And I'll put, I know it's in the PowerPoint, but I'll put my direct email as well in the chat.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yep.
And then before I lose you, so sorry, team, I just wanted to touch on what I was kind of thinking of doing. And I'll send our post over to you to have you review it. But I was thinking, we've received a lot of accolades here at our clinic. We score really high on all of our HRSA audits. I wanted to do some type of form of peacocking, to where I want to show off and highlight why we're a great clinic to work for. And I was just wondering, have you seen this done by any center successfully? And if so, how?
So that is actually probably one of the main recommendations that we have. It's like, sing the praises of your health center. People want to know that. And especially in the health center world, like, unfortunately, a lot of people don't always know health centers exist. So this is a great place to get out that message. Like, this is why we're a great place to work there. So absolutely, a lot of the job reviews that we've done, that's actually a lot of the feedback that we provide to them. And we had one health center in the past. They were part of our behavioral health learning collaborative. We did job announcements review with them, and just the recruitment boot camp in general, all of the different topics. They were able to bring on 2 new providers, and the biggest part that they found was, again, highlighting why the health center is a great place to work. Like, how are you supporting your workforce? And then, because this one was behavioral health specific, one of the feedback that I gave was really important in bringing in like people who work in your behavioral health department to review those job announcements to ensure that they're using the correct language, especially for any clinical posting, and that all of those accolades, everything that you're that you want to showcase, that there's no like missing pieces that they may recognize that are especially important for anybody in that clinical setting. So we have seen that, and we do provide that feedback. Absolutely.
And I would just
Okay.
add just quickly in terms of like how to highlight it and how to do that, singing your own praises, which, because Michelle's absolutely right. You should absolutely be saying those things. is you can either sort of like a resume of someone, like it's a resume you're receiving, where it's like awards and certificates or whatever. You can have like health center awards or whatever and list those. And or if there's not, if like whatever platform you're using doesn't have an opportunity for that, you could include it in sort of the description or the like ask of saying like, join this award-winning health center team, like with, and then, in parentheses, awards, blah, 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 blah. So yeah, I would definitely, there are different ways to include it, but definitely like, that's wonderful that you have those accolades. And so let the people know. And then sorry, it seemed like you had another question.
No, no worries. That sounds perfect. Yeah, it was just mainly, I'm just trying to figure out how to best go about this. Like, do I create it in an image and have that be an image as part of the job posting? Do I, create a brochure, but that's a little lengthy. So I'm just kind of
Right.
wondering what's the best way
Well,
to go about all of that.
And I think you could do multiple things. And what I would suggest actually is, and I know time is very much a constraint, so 100% I understand that. But if you want to try out different methods and be able to see which ones are working or more effective than others, but I would say something where if it's just like a simple image, you really just want to capture, because attention spans are so short, just capture people really quickly in that moment of something they can scan or look at and be like, oh, okay, this is where this health center stands. Look at the awards that they've won. So I would probably lean more towards, how you said, just like, a small little image that can be included in the job announcement. Another thing you can do too, and I think naturally this happens when people are interested in job positions, most likely they will go to your website because they want to learn more. So ensuring that on your webpage, especially your main webpage, those accolades are posted on there. You have like your mission on the main webpage. So you can really utilize what you already have as a way to redirect people to get that information, and then just doing like a little short snapshot or image in the job posting itself.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I appreciate all of your time.
Oh, and I see, you're welcome. And I see Marcy posted, oh, perfect. Thank you so much.
That's a great
Posted an
resource.
excellent resource on choosing the right keywords. And I'll still, if I find anything else on that, I will absolutely send it. Thank you so much, Marcy.
And we'll add this resource, Marcy, that you just posted to the discussion board so that, as you're all thinking about this and returning to the materials across time, you can continue to access that. I also wanted to just quickly add this resource from CHAMPS, the Community Health Association of Mountain Plains States, which is the Region 8 Primary Care Association. It's just a list of sample job descriptions. So it's not quite the same as these like punched up job announcements, but just if you ever want to reference how other health centers are creating, or like what their job descriptions are for their positions at their health centers, that can be a really good resource to help with that. And then Danielle also posted that Katrina Kibben is a job posting pro and her website offers some free resources. So awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. And we'll put that on the discussion board as well. This is awesome. Thank you so much for bringing this question up originally, and then for everyone for your participation and sharing your thoughts. All right, does anyone have any other questions before we return to thinking about interviews? No. Okay, great. Well, yeah, thank you again for that. Let me close this and this. There we go. All right. So yeah. Great. So with all of that, some great discussion under our belts, we'll start talking today or about today's content, which is interviews. So first we'll talk about those phone screening interviews. Once you begin to attract those candidates, it is so important to track those results. It's critical to, of course, respond quickly, communicate often, and ensure that rapid turnaround of any questions that are coming up, making sure that interviews are getting scheduled and people feel like, you're on top of things, and scheduling site visits or in-person interviews if you're doing those. There is an Excel document that's like an addendum and added resource with the comprehensive workforce plan template, and it's just called a candidate tracking sheet. And it's a tool for tracking those applicants through the recruitment process, so that if you don't already have a tool like that, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. So that's available there. But yeah, we do want to make sure that as those really wonderful qualified candidates are applying, we're the ones who are responding quickly and making sure that those good applicants don't slip through our fingers and end up getting accepted somewhere else. I think it's also a good way to like show that you're a high functioning workplace. I know when I've applied to places and they haven't even gotten back to me for weeks, I kind of again, getting back to some implicit biases, I kind of assume that they're not that organized. And if they're not that organized in their candidate communications, then they're probably not that organized as an organization in general. So I think it's also a good way to put your best foot forward to represent yourself and your organization well. So as you're preparing for your screening process, it's important to prepare your content ahead of time. Make sure that you have that overview of your health center, just like we talked about for writing those job postings and advertisements. You want to make sure that you're telling the story about the place that this candidate could potentially work. So you want them to have that understanding of who they'd be working for as an organization and as a community, and who they'd be working with, who their colleagues would be, and who those other mission-driven folks would be. And like I said, then that community that they would be serving or be a part of. Of course, obviously, you want to have your questions ready and make sure that you know what the next steps are so that you can communicate clearly with them about what the next steps are. And then during the health center, you use all that stuff that you had just prepared. So you describe your health center, all the population and all that stuff we already talked about. Make sure you're outlining the position, ask those predetermined set of questions, of course, following up with anything that comes up as they answer your questions. Of course, obviously, you want to allow them to be time for the candidate to ask them questions, and make sure that you're really able to listen, especially as our world continues to be in this like virtual setting. It's obviously really easy to multitask while you're doing phone calls or other virtual kinds of interactions. But as you're interviewing someone, you really want to make sure that that is the thing you are doing, is you're paying attention and listening and really hearing what they're saying. And then as you finish the interview, make sure that you communicate clearly what they can expect next. And again, this is a place where you don't necessarily have to be super quick in turnaround, although of course we know that folks who are applying to jobs are applying to multiple jobs. So you want to make sure that you're the one that they pick if you pick them back. But just be really clear. If it's going to be 2 weeks before you can let them know whether they'll have another interview or what the next step will be, let them know that, but don't leave people hanging. And then be sure to show that appreciation. Everyone's time is valuable, and make sure that you're thanking folks for their interest, their application, and the time that they've taken to talk to you. And then as you're, some of this is as you're going through it, some of it is afterwards. Make sure that you're recording those responses so you can share them with your team. You want to present the results of that phone interview. Think about if you have any additional questions for the candidate. What would you like to know more about them? Think if they're a good fit. And again, as we've talked about so much in this Learning Collaborative, we want to make sure that we're not just seeing folks that would be a good fit that can just sort of slot into what we already have, but would they be a good fit in the sense of like, how would they add to your organizational culture and sort of not necessarily need to assimilate, but add that value. And then if they are a good fit and you want to, you are ready, you can schedule that on-site interview. Of course, you can follow up with another phone interview, a Zoom interview, depends on what you want, but yeah, you want to schedule that next thing. So again, as we've talked about a lot during this Learning Collaborative, we want to be sure that we're being really intentional about JEDI, our Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion. So review those applications with diversity and inclusion in mind. So think about, if possible, excluding information that could lead to bias, such as, you can say that they got like what degree they got, but maybe not including the school they got it from, in case folks have certain biases against their, an educational institution. Or removing names. We all know that there's that famous study about how someone with the exact same resume could face discrimination, or just not be offered a position based on the name that they have. This goes into being aware of subtle and unintended bias when you're reviewing those resumes and CVs. Again, educational institutions, the location of their prior employment, the type of experience they've had, their gender, etc. Make sure you're identifying a list of core questions that you ask of all candidates. Questions should be related, obviously, to the job description. And also ensure that that your search committee, everyone who's part of the interviewing process, is aware of those illegal questions. And the interview process should be as close to the same for all candidates as possible. Of course, sometimes someone says something that sparks another question and you want to follow up on it, but do make sure that everyone's having this as close to the same opportunity and experience as possible. Consider that cultural difference really can affect your first impression of candidates. For instance, the standard interview in the United States uses that criteria of self-confidence, goal orientation, enthusiasm, and leadership, even though these qualities may not be apparent in people from different, more reserved cultures. So be thoughtful about how your cultural biases are impacting how you're viewing candidates. Of course, do reserve ample time for interviews and evaluations. It's known that bias emerges more when evaluators are limited by time pressure. So there's nothing wrong with having implicit biases. We all have them based on the way we've been socialized. But if we have more time to be more thoughtful and objective and being considerate of the implicit biases we know we have, we are able to sort of mitigate the impacts of those implicit biases. Whereas, the point of biases is to help our minds make those quick associations. And so if we're under time pressure, we're so much more likely to make those decisions based on our implicit biases. And then, of course, be sure to establish a diverse hiring committee. Make sure that your hiring committee should really demonstrates an understanding of DEI principles. And if they don't already, be training them on that. That can be part of professional development, is ensuring that you're training folks on diversity, equity, and inclusion principles as part of their being on a hiring committee. And then you can invite external partners if needed. Think about inviting someone from the board, someone from another community-based organization, etc. And as Michelle was talking about in terms of having folks review your job postings, include someone from the department that you're hiring for, of course, to make sure that there's that perspective of what it's like to work in that department, but also what kinds of qualities and qualifications they need in that department. And then here's some just sample JEDI questions for an interview. We do encourage that folks are including questions around JEDI or social determinants of health, social drivers of health on these kinds of as part of their interviews to, again, make sure that there's some of that understanding. It's important you can be looking for, did the candidate address different aspects of diversity beyond race and gender? Did they think about religion or disability or neurodiversity, etc.? Did they have a clear understanding of what equity and inclusion means? And did they appear to champion those values? And of course, we also want to say, someone doesn't necessarily already have to have, the perfect answer to what have you done to further your knowledge or understanding of justice, diversity, equity, and inclusion. They don't necessarily have to say, I've read Stamped from the beginning and I listen to Code Switch every week and blah, 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 all these things. It is important to look for the ways they're answering those questions, but also these are trainable and teachable things. So we don't want to be excluding folks because they don't already necessarily have the vocabulary or all the background on JEDI principles. It's important to ask them, but don't let it be the thing that excludes someone, just so long as they're willing to learn and become more aware of those social drivers of health and the different inequities and social justice issues that impact your patient's health. So then as you're doing your on-site interview, this is really your opportunity to showcase your health center and your community. It's your chance to get to know the candidate better and see if they would be a good fit. Yes, of course. But in the event that they are a good fit, you want to make sure that they would be excited to accept that position and come to be a part of what you've got going on. So, of course, just like with everything, you should plan ahead, think about who you'd want to be involved in this process. So who from the health center will partake and what will their roles be. But beyond that, are there community members you'd like to include? Are there patients that are, really can sing the praises of your health center? Are there community leaders? If someone will be moving there, again, this is a little bit more for a physician position or another provider position, but if someone would be moving there, do you want to introduce them to a real estate agent? And these folks can help give that candidate a really warm welcome and make the idea of working for you really appealing. Like I said, this is more if you're bringing in a clinical provider, behavioral health, oral health, or an optometrist from outside of your community. And as always, it's great to hire as much as possible from within the community. You know what's best for your health center, though, with any given candidate or any position. So, of course, rely on what you know is needed for your own community and health center. Of course, we do know that this stuff is expensive, but as we've talked about, turnover is more expensive. So it is worth spending the money on this, but of course it also has to be sustainable. So you have to make sure that you're doing what is right for you and what makes sense for your organization and what you will be able to sustain. So in terms of those logistics, think about travel. Who's going to be making the trip? Is it just the candidate? Do they have family? Do they have a partner they'd be bringing? Will they need a rental car? Are you putting them up in a hotel? Where are they going to be getting their meals? Make sure that they have the addresses of the health center and various places of interest. For the visit, make sure that you're offering those tours of your site and potentially the local hospital if you're partnering with them in any way. Have those meetings pre-arranged, ready to set up with your support staff, your providers, your CEO, your CMO, all those folks. If they are bringing a partner or a family, think about any schools that that person might want to see, whether if there's childcare that they could access, realtors or community members that you might want that person to meet, potential employers for the partner. And then a joint itinerary could be a dinner or a meeting with key staff for the candidate and their partner, dinner or meeting with other providers. And then if there's a cultural or unique community event happening at that time, that can be, a good way to ensure or, show someone at least a little spark of what your community can be like. Of course, again, we know this is expensive and we know that during COVID, things really changed. And as we've become more competent and confident with these virtual interactions, it's important to think about ways that we're doing these things differently. So if you are doing a virtual on-site interview or site visit, do think of it sort of the same way as you would an in-person one. So bring in those different people. So someone's not just talking to one person or one small group of people from your organization. Do go on those, like get a GoPro and go on a virtual tour of your health center with them. Think about how you could be welcoming to a candidate's family in a virtual way. And this is really an opportunity to get creative. So thinking about, you could even go to a cultural event. If there's a festival happening, take a GoPro on that, and maybe don't bring them with you in your GoPro, but make a video of like, this is something that was happening in our town this weekend. We just wanted you to know that this is what this community is like, and this is how we celebrate this piece of our history or whatever. So again, it's a time to get creative. I don't want to be prescriptive because it really does depend on what's going on with your health center, but it is important to think about how we're going to continue to operate as, again, in this continuing COVID / still in COVID, it's ambiguous and nobody knows kind of world, and this world where we do things virtually. So I do want to highlight that we have in the comprehensive workforce plan toolkit, one of the tables is this visit details worksheet. It's table 18 of the comprehensive workforce plan template. And it can help you plan out those on-site interviews and think about what kinds of things you need to be arranging and thinking ahead, et cetera. And yeah, you can just like take things, itineraries you've already had and sort of plug it in here. And this is just a helpful way to get your head around all those details. And then, so in terms of following up with the candidate after you have done that recruitment interview, whether it's all been on the phone, virtual, on-site, you want to make sure you have a plan. You want to think about how you're going to be communicating with that candidate and make sure you have a established plan where folks know what's going on. You want to think about the frequency of following up with them, making sure that you're not letting them slip through their cracks, but also not pressuring them too much. But yeah, definitely making sure that they know that you're interested if that is the case. You want to think about the timeline of like when you would need them to be starting and what that would look like for them. And you know, if they do need to move into your community, how could you assist them with that timeline? Think too about how you're in terms of the communication, what type of contact are you texting them? Are you calling them? Are you sending them an email? And this is something that you in the interview process, you can ask what their preferred mode of communication after the interview is. And also think about, you know, what's working. If you've emailed them twice and they're not getting back to you, give them a call, send them a text, et cetera. And then of course, thinking about who's responsible. So who's going to do what type, which of the following up, what type of contact can you enlist? If, you know, if it's a physician, can you enlist your CMO to call them afterwards and say, hey, thanks so much for coming out to the site visit. We really enjoyed talking to you. And we hope that you'll join us as part of our team, so that they're not necessarily just talking to HR staff, but they again feel that sense of community of like they would be joining an entire group of people and that group of people would be excited to have them. So that's our quick and dirty stuff on phone interviews and in-person interviews. Now, I do want to hear from y'all. What is one unique thing that you do during your on-site or in-person interview? Does anyone have a unique thing that they have candidates do, or in a way that they interact with candidates? And I also see in the chat, Michelle added that one thing you can also ask the candidate is what attracted them to the job when they read the job announcement. And this information can really help you get to know what caught their eye, both for future applications and again, to like help as you're going through that interview process of helping them connect to the work. And yeah, what initially drew them to it can be the thing that seals the deal. All right, while y'all are thinking of your unique aspects of your on-site interview, I'll share one example of a health center that ACU has worked with. They have actually a 5-day on-site interview process, which is pretty long, we know, but it's over a weekend, and they really do try to help the interviewee get a feel for what living in that community would be like. So yeah, it's like they tend to try to have it over this specific weekend where there is like a festival. So I think that, you know, again, it can be really long, but if the return on investment is really high, it can be worth it. I see that if time permits, these folks schedule a 1-hour shadowing with a provider. That's awesome. Sort of like staging if you're a chef. Yeah, seeing what it would actually be like in that space. And then Michelle, I saw that you unmuted.
Yes, one of the things I was going to add, and Helen, when you were mentioning that, it made me think about it. There was one health center, especially with individuals who are coming in like leadership positions or like chief medical officers, those type of roles, and they're moving to that area, they're moving with their family. They've set up for the candidates, if they wanted to meet with like local real estate agents, to see the local schools. So I know there's a lot that goes into that planning process, but really what this health center did was they actively made partnerships with all these different groups in the community, from, you know, the local high school to the real estate agents. You know, if the spouse or the partner has some type of job that they're looking for as well, those type of things, and they scheduled that into the process. But again, you know, we do understand that does take a lot of time and planning, but this is something that I think would be really great in the planning process of looking at, is this something we can do in the future?
Yeah, for sure.
And Helen, there was one other thing that I forgot to mention with the job announcements, if it's okay if I
Yeah.
just very quickly mention that.
Yeah.
So, and this actually has come up a few times. So another really big like tip that we give people is to ensure whatever you're using for people to submit their applications to the job announcement, that it's a very easy program to use. And the reason I'm bringing this up is we know a lot of programs, like, you know, you attach your resume, but then they ask you all the questions where you have to write out exactly what was in your resume. And I've actually both read about this, but heard just from personal friends of mine how when they've had to do that, they're just like, I'm not even going to bother to apply to the job. I mean, and these are very highly skilled clinicians, you know, people with that are very mission driven, all of that. So you really don't want to start off with someone being like, oh, I just, this is way too complicated. So however you can simplify it, highly recommend that.
I think that's such a good point. Yeah. And there's like this is like such a common thing that there's memes about it. There's TikToks about how ridiculous this is, that you have to send in your resume and then also just input little pieces of your resume into those things. So yeah.
One of my probably most accomplished friends, like academically and clinically, she was like, that's just disrespectful.
Yeah.
And was like, I'm not gonna do that. And I just feel like, you know, these organizations are losing such a great potential candidate because of that. So I just wanted to mention that as well. Sorry, Helen.
No, great. Thank you so much for bringing that up. All right, I have another question for the group. So what is one aspect if you're feeling like you don't have a hugely unique thing, what's one aspect of your hiring process or interview process that you feel like your health center excels at? Where are you doing really well in your interview process? You put it in the chat. You can unmute and shout it out either way. Oh, in case anyone heard that alarm on my phone, it's time for me to take some medication. I'll do it after this. All right, we've got in the chat from Marcy. Oh, this is a great question. So how do you handle getting EEOC applicant track information if providers do not want to apply for a job officially in our applicant tracking system? So I think you can still have folks applying within your applicant tracking system. Just make sure that it's not duplicative. Like, don't have them also then submit a resume, or be thoughtful about how, like, what pieces are going to be required in that applicant tracking system. And then Michelle, did you have something?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I mean, because you have to have an applicant tracking system. It's just ensuring that you have one that is user friendly. So you don't want to lose a great candidate when they're like, I literally could just upload my resume. You're still going to look at the resume, but then I have to spend, you know, all this extra time rewriting what was in my resume. So that's really, it's not using an applicant tracking system, because that's incredibly important and needed to collect all that information and keep everything together, but that the system you are using is user friendly and can allow people to go through it as quickly as possible to send in all that you require for the job posting.
And then Parker, did you have a question or something to share? Or
yeah, thanks, Helen. So for this question, so I was thinking about it. The organization I work with, CCI Health Services in Maryland, just outside of Washington, D.C., we're a very diverse organization, something like 80% plus BIPOC staff members, and the city and areas we service are very diverse as well, some of the most diverse in the country. So it's really easy for us to talk about DEI initiatives in our interview process to kind of gauge how passionate the prospective applicant is about it. And it can be a deciding factor to see if they don't necessarily have to understand everything, but we need to know where their heart is in terms of how much this matters to them. So we have a really good sense of being able to read, what they value in terms of DEI efforts.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's so great that your organization is focusing on this and has such great diversity that represents the communities you're serving. And then, yeah, that you include it in those in the interview questions to, like you said, make sure that folks' hearts are there.
For sure. And I think it helps a lot that, it's not just a matter that we are diverse, but it's just people are they really believe truly in it. And really, so it's a shared mission. Besides the care that we offer, we're also about, instilling more initiatives in promoting equity.
Right. Yeah, and that then connects back to just the health center movement as a whole. Like we have this beautiful privilege of coming from social justice movements. And so, yeah, it's this beautiful like honor and opportunity to be part of a legacy of that. And yeah, if you're passionate about those things, then it will make sense that you're passionate about the mission that health centers are fulfilling. And then I see that there's something in the chat. Let me check. Oh, yeah. And then Danielle asked Parker if you have any questions geared toward Jesus, I cannot read, DEI that you would share. You're welcome to put those in the chat, share them here, or put them onto the discussion board, share with your peers that way. And then as Michelle mentioned, we have several questions that we can share around things you can ask to gauge that kind of thing. All right, so as we come to the end, what's one thing about your interview process that you feel like you could improve? Does anyone have something that they're like, oh, I want to be working on? Consistency with managers approach. That's a great one. Yeah, again, to make sure that folks are having those same opportunities through the interview process, and that managers are trained in how to make sure that those opportunities are being offered, but also that, you're putting a consistent message out about who you are as you're in that interview process. All right, that's great.
One thing we did here was ensuring that for the candidates that are applying for the same role, that you're asking them the exact same base questions. Obviously, there may be follow-up questions that are different, but it really gets to that equity piece on being able to properly assess one candidate versus another by ensuring that you're just asking the same questions throughout.
Yeah, 100%. Great. All right, well, of course, you can continue thinking about this. Oh, we've got the panel being more flexible on their availability, so we can schedule interviews sooner rather than later. Yeah, absolutely. That is a very fair thing to try to work on because, yeah, like we said, as folks are applying for things, they often go with whoever got back to them the fastest and the quickest and seemed most interested in them, especially in this workforce labor market. Like it's a workers market, if we're putting real estate terms on this, of like the workforce has opportunities and has choice. And so you want to be that person who's making sure that your panel is available to meet as soon as possible. So yeah, that's a great one to work on. Awesome. All right, well, does anyone have any questions about this content before we move on to sort of next steps? And like Michelle said in the chat, if there's going to be a delay, email the candidate and let them know, communicate, just like making sure that you're communicating regularly again, so they don't feel like they fell off your radar or that you aren't actually interested. But yeah, whatever's going on, make sure you're communicating.
And I don't have a question, but I would just love to, support what Michelle was just saying there. You know, in the times that I've applied for jobs in other organizations, even times when I've been declined, when the process was professional, when everything was timely, when the people I was interviewing with were, you know, personable and thoughtful, all these things made me want to apply again in the future and even become maybe a supporter. So I've been really kind of pushing and, you know, encouraging the team to really be personable in when they're, you know, talking with potential clients. Even if they're declined, there's a way to do it that, you know, is respectful and will bring a potential supporter or ally, you know, and not have to, you know, write off the candidate forever.
I think that's such a great point. Thank you so much for sharing that. I absolutely agree. And also we know that like folks are in communication and in community with each other. So again, you might want that person to apply again. And you want them, if they're talking about your organization, not to say like, oh, well, they blew me off, it wasn't great, because they might be talking to their other physician or behavioral health or oral health professional friends. And yeah, you want to make sure that, yeah, just that branding piece, and also just being a good person who's putting out good energy. But I think that's such a great point. Thank you so much. That's fantastic. Michelle also adds, don't ghost the candidate, and thank you for that, Parker. And yes, Michelle.
I was just saying I
yeah.
like CCI because I think, Parker, that's where you're from.
Yeah. Yeah. So as many of you know, ACU is based in DC. So many of us live in DC, and Michelle is one of those folks. I do not, but yeah, so that's awesome. All right, so our next steps are we have an assignment on interviews and on-site visits. So make sure that you're doing that. It'll be on the dashboard or on the discussion board later today, I believe. And like Michelle mentioned, and like I mentioned during that last session, send any job announcements you'd like us to review. You can send them directly over to myself or Michelle, or send them to that info@chcworkforce.org email, which does go directly to Michelle, and she can pass them on to me. And again, we just want to highlight, like, this is an offering that you get and not everyone gets. So feel free to take advantage of this cool opportunity. And then before we let you go, of course, please do fill out the evaluation. It should have popped up for you. Again, we love the feedback in session. Like, this was so great. I think I love to pivot and address what's actually on y'all's minds. So that is great for me, but we also love the feedback in the evaluation. The next session is 2 weeks from today, April 12th at 2:00 Eastern. The next session we'll be talking about contracts and onboarding. Onboarding is like a little bit of a passion project for me, so you might see me get really excited. And yeah, that we look forward to seeing you then. We also want to highlight that we would love to hear from folks if you've been enjoying this learning collaborative, or if you've engaged with other resources from the Star Center. We're looking for someone to be interviewed for a 20 to 30-minute interview for our podcast series. This one is specifically highlighting success stories with using Star Center workforce resources. So whether you have looked at our onboarding checklist, or this learning collaborative has been really helpful to you, or if you've participated in a different learning collaborative, we'd love to schedule an interview. Michelle will be conducting the interviews. Feel free to reach out directly to her, or again, you can reach out to me and I'll pass you along. And then I have so much information to tell you here at the end of this session. I also want to highlight this workforce summit that's coming up. It's virtual. We do it in partnership with Community Health Center Inc., or CHCI, and the National Association of Community Health Centers, or NAC. It's virtual, it's free, it's 2 days, 5 hours with like breaks and great content. Really wonderful experts from the field, and we'll also do like panel discussions and breakout groups. It's a great way to connect with your peers and network, but again, free and virtual, which makes it a lot easier to attend than some of the in-person offerings. And then, but speaking of wonderful in-person offerings, we are also getting ready for our annual ACU conference. It's in Washington, DC again this year. Again, so many great speakers and so many great things going on. We do poster presentations as well as those didactic sessions. We have a whole workforce track, and it's a really fun conference. And yeah, Michelle and I will be there, and Mariah and the whole Star Center team, along with our ACU colleagues. And then as always, here are some resources and tools. I think we've already mentioned the onboarding checklist in previous sessions, but again, that's a new tool that's out there and available, and that's what onboarding will be the topic we're talking about next time. So feel free to check that out in advance. And then, of course, there are other ways to learn and connect with us, and feel free to contact us at any point. And those are all my announcements with 3 minutes to spare. Does anyone have any final questions or need a reminder of how to get to the dashboard, or the discussion board? I always call it a dashboard. It's a discussion board. Anything like that?
And Helen, I posted the link to the discussion board in the
Wonderful.
chat, as well as our conference link.
Perfect. Great. Thank you so much. So yeah, you can follow those links directly. And like we said, we'll post those resources that were shared during this session on the discussion board as well. And yeah, if you have resources on DEI questions you ask, other kinds of interview questions you think have really resulted in great results, feel free to post those there. I will say one really interesting question I heard that a health center asks of their candidates that goes along with that. Do they understand the social drivers of health, et cetera? Is they ask, why are people poor? I think that is a very interesting question to ask in an interview. It like shows you a lot about what the person thinks, but it can also show that you as an organization are like wanting to make sure that people are being thoughtful about the folks that you'll be serving. Anyway, that's all of my rambling. If you don't have any questions, I'll let you go 2 whole minutes early. I know, what a thrill. And of course, feel free to reach out throughout the next couple of weeks if you do have questions, and send us those job announcements if you'd like us to review them. And we'll see you in a couple of weeks.